Hello, boys and girls. This is Mrs. Carpenter. I'm back with Mr. Popper's Penguins. I'm going to read Chapter 2 today. Chapter 2 is called The Voice in the Air. That evening, when the little Poppers had gone to bed, Mr. and Mrs. Popper settled down for a long, quiet evening. The neat living room at 432 Proudfoot Avenue was much like all the other living rooms in Stillwater, except that the walls were hung with pictures from the National Geographic magazine. Mrs. Popper picked up her mending, while Mr. Popper collected his pipe, his book, and his globe. From time to time, Mrs. Popper would sigh a little as she thought about the long winter ahead. Would there really be enough beans to last, she wondered. Mr. Popper was not worried, however, as he put on his spectacles, and he was quite pleased at the prospect of a whole winter of reading travel books, with no work to interrupt him. He sat his little globe beside him, and he began to read. "What are you reading?" asked Mrs. Popper. "I'm reading a book called Antarctic Adventures. It's very interesting. It tells about the different people who've gone to the South Pole and what they found there." "Don't you get ever tired of reading about the South Pole?" "No, I don't. Of course, I would much rather go there than read about it, but reading is the next best thing." "I think it must be very boring down there," said Mrs. Popper. "It sounds very dull and cold with all that ice and snow." "Oh, no," answered Mr. Popper. "You wouldn't think it's dull if you had gone with me to see the movie, The Great Drake Expedition of the Bijou, last year." "Well, I didn't, and I don't think any of us are going to the movies anytime soon," answered Mrs. Popper, a little sharply. She was not at all a disagreeable woman, but sometimes she got rather cross when she was worried about money. "If you had gone, my love," went on Mr. Popper, "you would have seen how beautiful the Antarctic is. But I think the nicest part about all of it is the penguins. No wonder all the men in the expedition had such a good time playing with them. They're the funniest birds in the world. They don't fly like the other birds. They walk erect like a man, and when they get tired of walking, they just lie on their belly and they slide. It would be very nice to have one as a pet." "Pets?" said Mrs. Popper. "First it's Bill wanting a dog, then it's Janie begging for a cat, and now you with penguins. But I won't have any pets around. They make too much dirt in this house, and I have enough work right now trying to keep this place tidy, to say nothing of what it costs to feed a pet. Anyway, we have a bowl of goldfish." "Penguins are very intelligent," continued Mr. Popper. "Listen to this, Mama. It says here that when they want to catch some shrimps, they all crowd around the edge of an ice bank. Only they don't jump in, because a sea leopard might be waiting to eat one of the penguins. So they crowd and they push until they manage to shove one penguin off to see if it's safe. I mean, if he doesn't get eaten up, then the rest of them know it's safe to jump in." "Oh, dear me," said Mrs. Popper with a shocked tone. "They sound to me like heathen birds." "It's just a silly thing," said Mr. Popper, "that all the polar bears live in the North Pole, and all the penguins live in the South Pole. I should think the penguins would like the North Pole, too, if they only knew how to get there." At 10 o'clock, Mrs. Popper yawned and laid down her mending. "Well, you can go on reading about those heathen birds, but I'm going to bed. Tomorrow is Thursday, September 30th, and I have to go to the first meeting of the Ladies' Aid and Missionary Society." "September 30th?" said Mr. Popper in an excited tone. "You don't mean that tonight's Wednesday, September 29th? "Why, yeah, I suppose it is, but what of it?" Mr. Popper put down his book of Antarctic Adventure and moved hastily to the radio. "What of it?" he repeated, pushing the switch. "Why, this is the night the Drake Antarctic Expedition is going to start broadcasting." "That's nothing," said Mrs. Popper. "Just a lot of men at the bottom of the world saying, 'Hello, Mama, hello, Papa.'" "Shh, shh, shh," commanded Mr. Popper, laying his ear close to the radio. There was a buzz, and then suddenly from the South Pole a faint voice floated into the Popper living room. "This is Admiral Drake speaking. Hello, Mama. Hello, Papa. Hello, Mr. Popper." "Gracious goodness," exclaimed Mrs. Popper. "Did he say Papa or Popper?" "Hello, Mr. Popper, up there in Stillwater. Thanks for your nice letter about the pictures of our last expedition. Watch for an answer, but not by letter. Mr. Popper. Watch for a surprise. Signing off. Signing off. You wrote the Admiral Drake? Yes, I did, Mr. Popper admitted. I wrote and told him how funny I thought the penguins were. Well, I never, said Mrs. Popper, very much impressed. Mr. Popper picked up his little globe and found the Antarctic. And to think he spoke to me all the way from there, and he even mentioned my name. Mama, what do you suppose it means by surprise? I have no idea, answered Mrs. Popper, but I'm going to bed. I don't want to be late for the Ladies' Aid and Missionary Society meeting tomorrow. And that was chapter 2. I wonder what the surprise is. Thank you.